Hi, my name is Joan Cohen, and I'm a writer. I write fiction. I write on a glassed-in porch with a view of Stockbridge Bowl. Autumn in New England inspires poetry, but I don't write poetry. When I was 17, I wrote a 12-verse poem for my English class. My teacher made copies and handed them out to the class as an example of the pitfalls of the amateur poet. I haven't written any poetry since. After college and a few years of work, I returned to school for an MBA and enjoyed a career working in sales and marketing for technology companies. After retirement from the corporate world to become a consultant, I had the flexibility to go back to school, this time for a Master of Fine Arts in Writing. My first class required me to write short stories. To me, a short story is like a jewel, an entity unto itself, containing the perfect arc of a story with all the necessary words and none that are superfluous. I struggled to master the form. The novel is more forgiving. That's not to say it can be sloppy. It's just you don't have to wear a whalebone corset when you're writing it. I don't write fiction as a retreat from reality, more the opposite. I write in the hope of shedding new light on reality. When I write, I'm not thinking about whether I'm writing a book that will sell, but I do write for a reader, albeit an imaginary one. Otherwise, I would stick to keeping a journal, as so many people do. Sometimes my characters work in a business, like I did. We spend so many hours at work. That may be where some of our insights about people come from. The rules we live by or don't live by apply there. Writing about dilemmas interests me. I wish I could say I've solved them, but what makes them interesting enough to write about is their ambiguity, that they continue to confound us. In my second novel, The Deep Fake, a young woman who sells artificial intelligence software for a living falls for her physical trainer, who works for a gym in her building. He believes AI is dangerous, fraught with risk. The Deep Fake is part corporate crime drama because a lot of strange things go on in this company. And it's part family drama and part romance. The protagonist's name is Sylvie. Her trainer's name is Fielding, but everyone calls him Rip because of his baseball career when he was young. Sylvie and Rip argue about AI during their training sessions, with Rip arguing for his view of ethics. He's very much of a moralist. His father was a rabbi, but he chose not to follow in his father's footsteps. Sylvie is by nature a people pleaser, which Rip questions, because Sylvie sometimes gets carried away with her people pleasing, and it is possible to go overboard. I'm going to read about a time in the parking lot of the building that they both work in, when a huge snowstorm has come through. And in this passage, you'll see that their relationship has moved forward. Outside our building was a fairy tale landscape of snow-wrapped toy cars and cottony branches topped with a sparkling layer of ice that sleet had deposited. Where there had been snowy mounds before with the stems of shrubs poking through, there were higher drifts obscuring all plant life. Employees looked like bundled gnomes, battling to clear their windshields of the stubborn ice beneath the snow. I turned on my ignition to get an assist from the heater and grabbed my scraper. But I was working against the storm, which seemed intent on foiling my best efforts. When at last I was ready to pull out of my space, my tires spun in protest. I rocked my car back and forth, but nothing worked. As I grew more desperate, I continued my frustrating efforts, though I knew I was probably flooding my engine. Most cars were already gone, and snow again coated my back and side windows. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and wondered if I would have to spend the night in my office. The minutes passed, marked only by fruitless swipes of my windshield wipers. Someone was calling me, rapping on the windshield with a scraper. Rip was out there, asking if I was okay. "You can't leave your engine running in this heaviest storm. It could be dangerous." He was yelling at me like I was a little kid. "I'm stuck." "Leave your car. Mine's already out. I'll take you home." If I wanted to get back to Needham, Rip's car was the only way I was going to get there. I grabbed my purse and briefcase and stepped out into the storm, letting Rip lead the way. "How come you didn't get stuck?" I asked, aggravated by the injustice of it. "Four-wheel drive and snow tires." He'd an answer for everything. I pitched my belongings into the back seat and brushed as much snow off myself as I could before getting in. We drove toward the highway entrance, but as we approached, we could see the endless red taillights disappearing around the bend. "Rip, this will take forever. And don't you have Dinger waiting for you at home?" Dinger is Rip's dog. Dinger is a home run. He was silent for a moment. "I live close by. Do you mind coming back to my apartment till I walk Dinger and the traffic eases?" Since there was no practical alternative, I agreed. Rip lived half a mile from our building, yet the ride seemed interminable. When I turned my head to see how he was managing, the clenched jaw and riveted eyes answered my unspoken question. By the time we pulled into his driveway, I was ready to accept the hospitality of Attila the Hun. Dinger was overjoyed to see us, but then that's the advantage of having a dog instead of a self-involved spouse. He was wagging his tail so hard, looked as though it were about to take off on its own like a kite. Rip put on Dinger's leash and went straight out, while I pulled off my boots and wet coat and collapsed into a well-worn brown corduroy club chair. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't a library in a living room. Garage sale bookcases in every size and color lined two walls. There were no matched collected works on display, only random titles shelved every which way. Volumes on math, history, geography, religion, and science, crowded novels and sports books. They were all fighting for breathing room, packed in like commuters in a subway car. If e-books and audio were replacing print volumes, you wouldn't know it from this apartment. I thought Rip was a know-it-all, but apparently he knew a lot. There was little else in this small apartment besides a plain wooden table and chairs, a futon sofa, and vintage baseball posters of the Brooklyn Dodgers. A menorah sat on one windowsill with wax strips still attached. I had just repositioned myself, sinking further into the cozy reading chair, when Dinger came charging through the door ahead of his master. While Rip shed his soaked parka and gloves, Dinger shed his coat of snow by shaking it onto me. I was fated to be cold and wet that day, a metaphor for something, I was sure. Although Rip chastised Dinger, he couldn't suppress his smile when he saw my clothes. Sorry about that. I'm usually his target. I'm going to change into something dry. Do you want me to find, I don't know, a three-piece suit for you? Actually, I still have a pair of sweatpants that shrunk in the dryer and a sweater that would at least be better than what you're wearing. My slacks were still wet from the knees down, and Dinger had more than dampened my blouse, so I agreed. I was glad there was no full-length mirror in Rip's bedroom, because I knew I looked ridiculous in his rolled-up sweatpants. His sweater had such a stretched neckline it kept slipping off one shoulder, flash dance style. Rip's laughter served as confirmation. That sweater is too small for me, so I guess I kind of stretched the neck getting in and out of it. At least you're dry. He offered me a beer. Might make you feel better about how you look right now. Well, maybe it'll just make you feel better. Don't you have anything hot? He was sheepish. Just ramen noodles. Sorry, I was planning to getting to the supermarket today. One glance out the window at the unrelenting snow made it clear I could be there for hours. Rip prepared the noodles in his microwave, and when he handed the bowl to me, I clutched it like a hand warmer. We sat down at his wobbly table, and I held my soup up in the air while he inserted a newspaper under the shorter leg. So, Rip, is this how you stay on top of the news? He groaned. More corny jokes like that, and I'm sending you back out into the snow. I didn't argue the point, since more than anything, I wanted to dive into my ramen noodles. Rip nursed his beer while Dinger curled up at our feet. Content, I let my thoughts wander, but they led me to an uncomfortable place. During our last run in the woods, Rip had chided me. Too many people think you're with them, an ally. It's duplicitous. My knee-jerk reaction had been resentment, although I knew there was some truth in his observation. I've been thinking about our last run when you said I let people pull me as though they were magnets. Sylvie, we don't have to go back. Is it wrong that I try to please, to accommodate if I can what other people want of me? I did that with my ex, Ashton, to a fault. But with Sam Warren and Richard at work, you think it's too much, even unethical? Would you kill to please someone? Of course not. So the problem is what would make you draw the line. If each of your choices were a dot on a graph, an outlier would change you as a person when you faced new choices. It would change the moral trajectory of your life, your line of best fit. He drew an imaginary line on the table with his forefinger. Line of what? Guess you don't remember your high school math. It's a straight line drawn on a graph as close to all the data points as possible. It crosses all, some, or none of them. Rip must have noticed my glassy-eyed stare. Look, pretend you're putting dots on a graph for Ted Kennedy's choices. He made many good ones until the disaster at Chappaquiddick. What do you think that did to his moral line of best fit? Point taken. I rinsed out my bowl at the sink and Rip dropped his bottle into a box of recyclables in the corner of his kitchen. I turned my back to the sink. I hate admitting it when you're right, but you're too easily influenced? No, I really should have four-wheel drive and snow tires. Rip looked up at the ceiling, exasperated. No, seriously, I'll consider what you said about my line of best fit. It hurts that you think less of me. Sylvie, you don't know what I'm thinking, at least not right now. He leaned in and kissed me. We stood facing each other for a moment, and I knew he wouldn't touch me again without a signal. I stepped forward and put my arms around him. For once, we were thinking the same thing. I'd like to thank Sherry Steiner and CTSB for the chance to participate once again in Solo Creatives of the Berkshires. And thank you for watching.